the LaxFactor podcast.
What is up, college lacrosse fans? Today I come to you with bad news, unless you're immature version of me, at which point this would be good news. But now that I'm a mature adult, this is really bad news. Hopkins and Dave Pietramala have decided to mutually part ways for whatever that's worth. But the reality means Petro was, kind of let go at Hopkins. For those within the Hopkins base that were calling for this, I've been saying for a while to the effect that you watch what you wish for. If you're, one of these fans calling for the head of your coach, at like a Syracuse, Hopkins, Princeton, or whatever, because you might get it. And this is that, the Petro's gone. So the fans that were calling for his head, you got what you wanted, but don't necessarily assume by any means that that's going to end up being a good thing. Petro's resume is right up there with the best of them. I mean, the guy is one of the best coaches to ever do it. Hall of Famer overall. 207 wins against just 93 losses. And that's despite playing one of the toughest schedules in the country every single year. Sure, there are teams that end up with strength of schedules that are tougher than Hopkins, but that's typically only partly because Hopkins is always a really highly rated team. So they end up playing teams ranked below them. It doesn't mean that their schedule's still not brutal, because I put their schedule at one of the most brutal that any of the top-notch programs play. Now that varies depending on conference year, how strong any, sometimes the ACC is stronger than the Big Ten. Lately, the Big Ten's been really tough. And, now the ACC's, pretty much looking to dominate beyond the Ivy with teams like UVA and North Carolina and Syracuse all fully loaded. So like in the coming years, I think it's going to be ACC heavy, but it all, strength of schedule depends on how your conference ends up being. But Hopkins' non-conference schedule was always right up there with the best. So he still gets to 207 and 93 despite playing that tough schedule. Over his tenure at Hopkins, 18 NCAA tournament bids, 7 Final Four appearances in 02, 03, 04, 05, 07, 08, and 15. So there's been a drought mixed in with the 15 run. Finals appearances in 03, 05, 07, and 08, natties in 05 and 07. You can make the argument, what have you done for me lately? But they're still making the tournament every year and, getting, through into the second round sometimes, but the last 3 tournament appearances, I believe they did get bounced in the first round. But then when you compare that to the other blue bloods that dominated, for a time, Syracuse, Princeton, those 2 teams as well. UNC had another blue blood program, had a big drought. Virginia had a drought, albeit not as long as everybody else's. So you could say that. The only thing I will say here is where the teams did have natty droughts that the administrations weren't happy with. A new coach did come in and eventually win one for them. So we'll take the case of North Carolina. They won a title in 91, and then after that, North Carolina only made it back to the finals once. And that was the actual following year, I believe, in 92, until Bresci finally took over, won them a title in 2016. But he was on his 8th year by the time North Carolina won that title in 2016. And that was kind of like the Giants' win over the Patriots the year the Patriots had gone undefeated, where the Giants limped into the playoffs and then went on to win the Super Bowl over a team that was trying to go undefeated with a Super Bowl win. And North Carolina that year limped into the playoffs. I believe they won. I don't know how I don't remember what specifically got them in, if they had an auto bid or if they just rattled off enough wins to get in at the end, but they were a rough team that year, and it did not look like a team that was going to win a national championship, even going into the conference playoffs. But then, hey, they did it. And then Virginia, their drought wasn't nearly as bad as UNC's. Dom Starsia won his last natty in 2011. And then UVA missed 2 playoff appearances, and they had 2 first-round losses, and that was enough to cause UVA to bounce Starsia. They bring in their new coach, and they win a national title here last year in Tiffany's. I was blanking on Lars's name for a second there. So they bring in Lars. He wins a title for Virginia in his 3rd season. So they had a much lower threshold than Hopkins has had so far for Petro. So I've been saying for a while, that Syracuse and Hopkins, I felt like needed to dumb down their schedules a little bit. You have teams like Duke and those guys in Virginia that play a boatload of games. They just play more non-conference games than Hopkins and Virginia did. Penn State, I think, was another one where they play like 2 to 4 additional regular season games beyond what Syracuse and Hopkins plays. So I feel like either their brutal non-conference schedules mixed with their conference schedules were too much for them to handle, and it was beating them down by the end of the year, or is it possibly they weren't playing enough games? When you look at the teams that have dominated lately, you got the Duke, and they always play a boatload of games, and they've done really well. And Duke is always tends to drop a couple games early. They skip scrimmaging, from what I understand, and they just get right into playing games, and then they play more games than almost everybody every year. And I'm not sure about how it falls for the Ivy League schools, but the Ivies fared very well. So that's something to consider. Also, is like what are these teams ending at the season for regular season games, and then what do they end up with at the end of their conference tournaments as well? And I wonder if I throw some stats together, how we would see these teams fare at the end, how often the teams that end up playing more games are the teams that are making it to the Final Four every year. So maybe that's something I'll take the time to look at. But moral of the story, as I just went on a total tangent there, is Petro, it's got to be a kick in the gut, even to the guys that wanted Petro out. I don't understand that. If I was Hopkins, I'd still want Petro in. I believe, just like I'm a Syracuse fan, and I'm cool with Desco at this point. What they've done in the regular season, making the tournament, you just get into the tournament, and one of those years you're going to win a national title is kind of how it works these days. You can't expect those teams, and that fan base has to kind of stop expecting to win titles and make the Final Four all the time. I think that we can expect runs where you make the Final Four a couple seasons in a row, and I was hoping that this was going to be the first of a couple of runs to the Final Four for Syracuse even, or maybe a couple every other year or something like that. But I feel like the guys even the guys that wanted it, you've got to be feeling it a little bit today. It's a little bit weird today. Your whole, your lacrosse world and the lacrosse landscape changed drastically with Hopkins being let go there, or Hopkins with Petro being let go there. So, I wish Petro the best of luck. I know that whatever he decides to do next, he's going to do it with a lot of passion. He's going to go hard, and he's probably going to succeed at a really high level no matter what he does next. So I wish him the best of luck with that. And it's a weird day, not waking up, but finding out that Petro's not Hopkins anymore. It'll be interesting to see where he does land, though. It'll be interesting to see what that does to Hopkins recruiting, and it'll be, who now begins the talk of who takes over. I've heard a lot of people talking about Nadalin taking over, and that kind of makes sense, and he might be a good fit. But they're on a national search here, so they're going to hire the guy they think is best for the job, and I would presume they're going to have their pick of some pretty decent coaches for this gig as well. I hear a lot of people talking about how they think that Hopkins will be D3 team before long. I doubt it. Look at Hobart. They're in a similar boat to Hopkins in terms of funding, and there's other schools too. And they've weathered that storm and have continued to play. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the right coach could turn things around for him. You end up seeing a little bit of initial success as people are excited about the new coaching hire, assuming that coach is the right guy for the job and does a good job, which proved to be the case with a Lars Tiffany, for example, because Virginia didn't fall off all that badly under Starja. So Tiffany was taking over at a good point, and then he was also happened to be the right man for the job. And that's why I think we see UVA win a national title here. So it could happen for Hopkins too. It has to be the right guy, but damn, I'm not a big fan of it. It does not please me, even though I'm a Syracuse fan. When I was a younger man, I would have been pleased to no end at any pain that Hopkins fans, players, alum would have to feel. And that now I realize that was childish. That was a childish way to be a fan of the sport of lacrosse. So many moons ago, I moved on from that. And I've been a fan of Hopkins. ESPN kind of plays into that a little because you end up watching as a lacrosse fan early on when they first started putting a lot of games on. Hopkins was always on. So you find yourself watching a boatload of Hopkins games. And I think that kind of maybe secretly made me enjoy watching Hopkins a little bit. It made me enjoy Petro more, but the reality just is he's a legend, and anytime you see a legend get let go, he's a human being too. So, it's a sad day for him. Nobody wanted Hopkins to succeed more than that guy. Nobody worked harder try to make sure that Hopkins had a good chance at succeeding than that guy. So, you know, you got to understand he's a human, and today sucks for him. You know, so thoughts go out to Petro, and I wish him the best of luck in whatever he does next. And like I said, he's going to kill it. So as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to go to LaxFactor.com. You can watch our videos there. You can hit up our sponsor, SidelineSwap, SidelineSwap.com. There will be a link in the description below. And what else? Be sure to like, subscribe, and all of that good crap. Hoost is out.